glad to see that some of you made it back. It's a good sign. We must have made some ground this morning. So I think we started to cover some of the major topics this morning: news versus entertainment, CG versus real video. Which kinds of headwear we think are going to take off. We're going to burrow down a little bit deeper this afternoon and go more closely into the pros and cons on the technical side and the production side. Very lucky to have Edward Miller here with us today. I said something this morning about we have a mix of like veterans who've made a long career in other media versus some of the kids who've kind of grown up with this. So forgive me, I think of Edward as one of the younger generation, one of the kids who's a real native in this field. He's the head of visuals for Immersively, which is a really groundbreaking company doing news coverage in VR. You've probably heard, you may have seen it out there. In fact, one of the piece they did to announce the launch of the company was Edward went to Hong Kong in the midst of the pro-democracy demonstrations there and did a live 360-degree video capturing of what was going on the streets of Hong Kong. That was a really very sort of major step in this medium. He's just got back he recently filmed an operation in London, live in the operating theatre, and he just got back from Dubai, where he showed that to an audience. So they're also looking into some of the ways in which the healthcare industry can benefit from the ability to stream this kind of content in that way. Anything else you'd like me to throw in there, Edward?
No, that all sounds
good. Good. Okay. And not to give it all away, but the title of his presentation is 360-degree cameras are flawed, and here's why.
Thanks very much. So I appreciate the title of the talk, somewhat contentious. So that's why I thought it would be good to have a little shuffle around and just make sure I come on after we've been introduced to it at least before trying to break it all down. So just to give you a little bit of context, if we get the laptop up on the screen. I'm using HDMI. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of context. I started off as a portrait photographer, which is a very hard area to be in. There, I was growing up, went to London trying to make it as a photographer, and there are so many photographers out there. How do you differentiate yourself from the plethora of other photographers? And that's when I was aware of the 360-degree photos, the virtual tours, and they seemed really interesting to me, but they were only really being used for virtual tours of hotels. No one had really taken them and used them creatively before. So what I was doing, I was capturing images that I would do normally with my normal cameras, but using a still camera to capture them in 360 degrees. This was actually one that I did as a personal piece. This was my brother's wedding. And if I actually ping over to this one here, you see my brother in the very center here. And we can wander around. We can have a look at every single guest that was at the party. And I think someone mentioned earlier that weddings, is going to be something that this is going to be used. This is my dad right here, by the way. And this is my mum looking incredibly happy. So what I had to do with this one was, because I'm only using a still camera, the 360-degree video wasn't really being able to use at the time. I had to say to each different group of people, so I think it was used with six different angles for the shot. So I had to say, right, you guys, you need to throw confetti in 3, 2, 1. Capture that and move on to the next people. So actually you're seeing a single image, but it's all taken at a slightly different amount of time. Then you had to go through an incredibly painstaking experience of having to merge that all in to make sure it's seamless, right? And in addition to that, what I thought would be fun was to tie it in with Facebook, right? Because that's where people like to share images, that's what people like to do. So actually you see these little tags here. This says Graham Miller, my brother, Kate Crandon, now Kate Miller, my sister-in-law. People were able to tag themselves in this photo, which got sent to their Facebook streams. They're able to share it with their family. And obviously, here is me, Edward Miller. Okay, so that was kind of quite nice. But we wanted to get one step further than that. We obviously wanted to be able to capture that day in video. We wanted to be able to allow people to relive those memories. So transitioned from 360-degree video 360-degree stills to 360-degree video. And that's when I went to Hong Kong. I've been working, kind of producing smaller 360-degree video experiences for a while. and paired up with a gentleman back in the UK that was a journalist, and I think a lot of people were realising this has profound impact for journalism. And we were sitting down, I'd shot one piece before that with him, and we were saying, well, what we really want to do is we really want to show how this could be used. What's the benefit of using this kind of type of capture? And we thought, right, something like a protest, when you can get really into the thick of it and show what it's like to be in the crowd, would be really, really powerful. So that's what we did. I'd mentioned that as an idea, and I flew out on my own the very next week. I went out there with 6 GoPro cameras, and an audio recorder, as well as a few other bits and bobs. But just basically really went into it in a guerrilla style. So this is part of the 360-degree image as a flattened view. So you're seeing an entire 360-degree horizontal as well as a 180-degree vertical view here. So you can actually see me. This is me right there. I'm holding it on a pole. I'm holding it above this elevator here. And this is my backpack. This contains everything that I had with me. So I had a stand here, and I'm actually using a boom pole. So traditionally, to what normal people would use to hold a microphone above the crowd when they're filming a scene, and it allowed you to get a completely unique perspective. I'm over here. It allowed you to get above the crowds to be able to show what it's like directly in the scenes. I can actually, again, if I flick over to this program here, and I'll actually turn the sound on for this one. I'll take you about halfway through the documentary. It was it's about a 7-minute long documentary. This was when they were trying to push through a bus deliberately to split up the crowds. They actually took over a large area of Mongok at this time. See the pepper spray? You're able to get right above the crowd. You'll notice there's quite severe camera shake in a moment, just because I'm there on the ground and I'm being pushed backwards, right? I've got this camera suspended 3 meters up in the air, okay? And obviously I'm controlling all of this, and you're able to look back at it afterwards. This is me here. You're able to discover things that you weren't able to see beforehand. I mean, at one point, I've got a gas mask on, you see? At one point, I noticed one of the locals actually was behind me, holding me, guiding me backwards, which was something I had no idea about afterwards. There's also kind of general themes that you see. This was somebody that's fallen over. And for everybody else, that's the camera crews that are all stood behind here, they can't see anything at all. So I'm basically using a very large selfie stick, right? And it's really that it's hard to portray the footage. It's hard to convey it in any way other than what happened in reality. So, when you look at what people use with creative license with journalism, you can take a photograph of a scene to portray it in a very specific way. But in this way, you're really exposing the entire thing and hopefully aiming for the truth. So, jumping back to the presentation. So it was quite interesting. So the day that this was released, it actually went online with 2 other news documentaries, and this is the first time anyone had done this. Just to have 2 documentaries released at the very same day was incredibly coincidental, but also demonstrated that it was something that's coming into the mainstream a lot more. So this is something that John Carmack says. So John Carmack now works at Oculus. He's a real veteran in the space. He said, the hardcore gaming crowd just does not understand how important pano photos and videos are going to be for VR. It's a way to make virtual reality accessible for people with their Gear VR, which John Carmack is now working on at the moment. It's something that you can, I can imagine putting on a headset onto my mum and to be able to show her, her son's wedding. That's a really powerful thing that kind of resonates with her in a way that maybe other kind of gaming with VR doesn't at the moment, at least. But we are still. I mean, we've kind of noticed. We've noted this same theme previously. This was the scene of the train arriving in the station. We are very much at that early stage of understanding the medium. We're going kind of back to hand cranking videos. We're starting to kind of have to make up a whole new rule book about how we can produce this kind of content. And it's really easy to put a headset on somebody and to say, "Wow, this is incredible. This is the future, right? This is amazing. Everyone's going to be using this." But it's really easy to misunderestimate that as saying this is something that I want to come back to again and again and again. Imagine, you watch the TV probably once a day. People can spend hours in front of the TV. I'm not certain whether we're at the stage where you can do that at the moment with VR. And we don't yet have the experience of having people use these headsets for a large amount of time. So I want to kind of like temper people's enthusiasm, not to diminish the enthusiasm, but just to treat it with a little bit of caution. So these are the cameras that I went out to Hong Kong with. They're very standard, commercially available. They're GoPros. I used 6 of them for this particular one. I'm now experimenting with other camera rigs at the same time because there are limitations with them. Like the stitching is incredibly tricky, and there are fundamental problems with that, which I'll get into later. But GoPro has actually just bought this company from France called Color, and they specialize in the stitching together of this content. I mean, GoPro didn't really need an excuse to buy a company that would allow them to sell 6 GoPros at a time. But it's a very clever move for them because they want to make 360-degree videos mainstream. You know how Facebook's now announced they're going to be supporting 360-degree video within the timeline. I mean, it seems a bit like a stepping stone to where they want to be, but that's absolutely what 360-degree video and stills offer. It's a stepping stone to where we want virtual reality to be. The problem with this is, again, I'm very kind of cautious about trying to overemphasize and overhype virtual reality and what it can do. So this is called the hype cycle. So you remember, a lot of you will be familiar with Google Glass. Okay, so this was a new technology that came around. We were promised great things. We were looking up onto YouTube and seeing this is the kind of things that you're going to be able to do with your life, right? And then once we actually get hold of the hardware, we realise actually no, it's not living up to the promises that it was providing to us. And it's only after that, it's called the trough of disillusionment. It's only after that that we start to actually foresee it for what it actually is and understand how to use this new content. I think Google Glass, it's a wearable, it's maybe augmented reality rather than virtual reality. I think it's got an amazing amount of potential. And we're only just coming out to this trough of disillusionment when we're starting to realise, yes, okay, it does have amazing potential. And remember about 20 years ago, we did the same thing with VR. We were having amazing promises made to us. And then once we got the hardware, we realised, actually, no, this hasn't lived up to our expectations. It's been quiet for maybe a few 20 years or so. People have been working in it, the army, healthcare, have all found very, very beneficial uses for virtual reality. And we're just kind of coming back out of this. But I'm worried that we're going to have another cycle and we're going to come back to here, because obviously Oculus Rift really kick-started the virtual reality revolution again. And we've got to be very careful that we don't promise too much and deliver too little. So it kind of needs a bit of moderation. This is a gyroptic camera. They offer anybody the ability to make 360-degree videos. It's going to be perfect for YouTube, for Facebook. But the problem with this is that people don't really necessarily understand the rules that you've got, that you're restricted by with this kind of content. They don't know that maybe we shouldn't move the camera because it's going to make people feel sick. They don't know that the difference between the frame rates and the refresh rates that you need to be shooting at to make sure it's a pleasant experience for everyone involved. And simulation sickness is a real thing. It's a good theory of it is the fact that your eyes are getting one kind of experience, but your balance, your inner ear, is telling your mind something completely different. So it gives your body the idea that something's not quite right, that you might have been poisoned. This is leading back to the evolutionary reasons behind this. So your body thinks you might have been poisoned, and you feel sick because of it. And that's one theory. Getting back into the benefits and positives, pros and cons of 360-degree video, I think it was mentioned previously the work at the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab. It was a meta-analysis, so they looked at 80 different studies that were made previously and tried to come up with some conclusions from all of this. And they said increased levels of user tracking, that's positional tracking, so being able to be in experience and move your head, move around, and have that translate to your experience. The use of stereoscopic, that's 3D, so being able to judge depth, okay? So positional tracking, the depth, and a wider field of view, that's how wide the screen, the head-mounted display, the virtual reality headset is that you're using. So currently, our field of view is around about 185 degrees. The majority of that is peripheral, obviously. The Oculus Rifts are kind of around about 100. So you've still got a wide amount of area that we're not addressing. And if you can address all those issues, you can really achieve that idea of presence, the idea that you are really physically in the space that you're experiencing. But the problem with the first two, stereoscopic and positional tracking, they're inherently hard for 360-degree video. There are fundamental problems with why that can and can't happen. So traditionally, I mentioned the wedding 360 shot that I created. This was done with a setup similar to this. So the idea being, you have to offset the camera in both planes. You have to offset the camera. So as the camera rotates around, it's rotating around the very center point of the lens. Okay, so that means as you rotate round, there aren't any what we call parallax errors. You don't have a difference between the way the foreground moves and the way the background moves. So after you shoot that, you then have a complicated process of having to stitch it together, saying, right, this photo, this point is the same as this point in this photo. When you're using 3D cameras, you're obviously separating that point out. So you're deliberately kind of putting in these parallax errors, which can lead to stitch lines when you're viewing a scene. So you're looking around and you see something that's not quite right. You'll see a jarring effect, which can really reduce the amount of immersion you feel. And when people are trying to rush into 3D 360 with devices such as this, they've used stereo pairs. So with stereo cameras, you use one set of pair, right? And it makes sense, right? So if we can do that with normal 3D content, why can't we just put lots together and expect it to work in 360? The fact is, it doesn't work like that. It can't work like that. At the moment, these stereo pairs here are offset at an angle. So as you're looking around, you have to tilt your head in order to make it appear smooth, right? Also, I think what I'm getting to is mathematically 3D 360, as long as you're only using two pre-rendered scenes, still video feeds, linear video feeds, it's mathematically impossible. The way I can illustrate this, so if you have a stereo pair of cameras looking up here, so we've got left and right camera, they're offering really good 3D when you're looking at it like this. As soon as you turn your head around and look at the same point, the positions have now swapped around. So your left eye is now looking where your right eye should be looking. So that it kind of crushes the sense of 3D, and you can't really get around that. The good news, however, is that there are some companies which are working very, very hard to push away from the stereo pair of stereo method of shooting 3D 360. So this is just a still frame from a company called NextVR, and they're using a technology called light field technology. So rather than capturing video content from a specific point of view, they capture it. You can imagine it as capturing it from multiple different points of view, and from that they're generating a 3D model. So we're really combining video with 3D content here. So that means when we translate round, it knows that this point is in the foreground. So it interacts with it in a different way than it would do normally. It's just slightly more intelligent. They capture it with these red cameras. So each of these red cameras costs maybe £200,000 sterling. You've got 6 of them here. I wouldn't have been able to go around and shove 6 of these cameras up on a stick in a protest. It just wouldn't happen. I wouldn't be able to afford it, right? So that's a cost barrier. You can shoot 3D 360 if you approach it in a careful way, but it's got costs associated with it. Another camera technology or another camera company that's really interesting is this company called Lytro. So you might have heard about Lytro a few years ago. They made this great consumer product that used a light field and a micro lens array, it's called. So it captured a photo from lots of different points of view, and after you capture that photo, you can refocus the point. It's really like fun to play with. And they realised you can actually use that to generate a kind of a bit of a 3D model from it. They've just received $50 million funding to convert their company, which was primarily related to consumer products, into using 3D light field technology for creating live action virtual reality experiences with light field technology. And I noticed that one of the guys at Lightro was on Reddit recently, and he was asking about various different lenses. And on his shopping list was this one. Okay, so they're really experimenting with what you can do, and I can only hazard to guess what they're planning to do with this kind of experimentation. Finally, this company called Otoy has produced this incredible way of rendering light fields. So this is something that I only discovered this video very, very recently, in the past couple of days. So they're using still cameras. These are still cameras. They're not capturing video, but they're capturing entirely around in a sphere, okay? So they're capturing a single point from multiple perspectives, okay? Once they've got those perspectives, they can stitch them together and generate a true 3D model of the space, okay? So this isn't just 3D in terms of 2 points of view. This is a genuine 3D model of the space. And because it's a 3D model, we can then move around that space with positional tracking. Remember what I said about the Virtual Human Interaction Lab? How positional tracking, what this gentleman is doing now, he's moving around and he's seeing that perspective change in his experience, okay? Now, obviously, that's still got limitations. There's nothing moving in the scene. But this is a huge step forwards to where we want to be. So one area we can go into, we can start thinking about, okay, let's move away from the 360-degree GoPro cameras. We can also look in just changing our approach slightly. So rather than thinking in terms of, I said thinking in terms of 16 by 9, rather than thinking in terms of traditional broadcast technologies. I mean, traditionally, when a new technology comes around, the technology is there a lot sooner than people's ability to realize how to use it, right? So when you get a touchscreen device, when touchscreen devices came around, people were thinking, right, what can I do with this touchscreen? I know, I'll put a keyboard onto it. Or, okay, so we're making games. I know, we'll put a virtual gamepad onto the screen, because that's what they've done previously, and they just port their previous workflows into this new medium. But once you stop thinking about it in terms of that, and start thinking, right, what does this open up for us? There are lots of opportunities for us. So I think we mentioned before the idea that you don't necessarily need 360-degree field of view. I think that's an incredibly valid case point. Okay, there are companies, like I said, NextVR are experimenting with just 2D cameras that concentrate on the 180-degree sphere of view. Someone mentioned about the planetariums. That's a really useful case point. And you can use the same technology that you've already been using. You don't need to invest in new camera systems, because you've probably already got some of these in your production studios. One of the ways we're trying to think about using this, traditional production workflows was with this scene. I mentioned I shot the Hong Kong scene with a company called Immersively. So the first piece I shot with them was this. It was an entertainment piece. And we wanted to shoot a scene from Shakespeare and kind of understand how we can make 360-degree footage accessible and cheap to produce. So we're like, right, what we can do, we can shoot people in a 360-degree green screen studio. It so happened we shot this with a 360-degree camera, but the idea being you could use any camera to shoot this scene. We then took the green screen out, we chroma keyed, we took the green out, and then placed them into this 360-degree photo that I took on the other side of the country. That means, if you use traditional camera equipment, shooting in front of a green screen, you can then take them out, you can put them into a CG, you can put them into a computer-generated environment. Then, because you've got this content in the computer-generated environment, you can walk around. You can walk around in that computer-generated environment because it's a 3D model, right? It's not just a single plane. You just render the video on a plane within that 3D space. Another company that's doing this, this is a company called Live Like VR. They basically recently had a press release that was explaining a little bit more about what they're doing. They were part of the Rothenberg Ventures, a venture capitalist company that are putting money into upcoming, really exciting virtual reality companies. So they had the idea, okay, why don't we take a 3D space, a space that's generated in a computer game environment like Unity or Unreal. We take a computer game environment and we just drop in a single point of view video feed. Okay, this is the idea. The idea behind this was that you could have your own private box at your favourite sports team's stadium. Okay, So they'd render, football on here, and you could actually interact in this space with your friends. So this is how it actually likes in a visualization. So notice this was coming in from a single feed. This was actually done with a GoPro, a single GoPro that generated this, and they used a little bit of computer wizardry to morph the content to make sure it appeared the right perspective for where the player was in the scene. But think about it. We've got this video. You can invite in your friends, as you would do normally with watching sports with your friends next to you. What if you've got friends on the opposite side of the world? You can now inhabit this space, enjoy your favourite football match, and also you can interact with other elements as well. You can bring in statistics. You can make it an entirely you can make an environment you can build content into. Okay. So, what if we take the same model that Live Like has used with Live Like VR and apply it to journalism? Now, how does that? What might that look like? So there was a picture recently of someone from Reddit. So Reddit's a website that you use to surface interesting content from the web. You can upvote and downvote content, and you can go to the website, and it'll surface interesting content, and people can have a discussion about it. And they've recently been working with a VR experience, and people don't really know exactly what that VR experience is. All we've seen is the traditional picture of someone with a headset looking amazed, right? Okay. This is how Reddit currently looks. I was thinking about what might Reddit in VR look like. What about instead of showing stories one by one in a list that people could comment on, what if it was a 3D space? What if it was a library? What if it was your local town hall that you could inhabit with other people? You have separate rooms for separate discussions. You can go in there and you can feel like you're interacting with other people, and you can have a true discussion, not just typing away on a message board, but you can actually see an avatar of that person. Once you start to think about it with journalism, you can have separate rooms for separate topics. You could have a separate room where you could go to where you could hear about people's own perspectives of the Hong Kong protests, chat with people that were there, show different video streams, try to build up a narrative about exactly what's happened. That's a new type of content. You can't do that on a TV. It's trying to think about what these new headsets provide us and utilising exactly what they give you. It's not just putting a screen on your face, all right? So a few companies that are using this really well. We mentioned briefly about social experiences. So this is a screenshot from a program called VR Chat. So you can imagine VR Chat. Some of you will be aware of The Sims or Second Life. These are digital experiences that you can experience with your avatar. So you take on a specific persona. You can be inside these experiences. So every week, these guys put on a headset. They're taken into this virtual environment. They see their friends, and they can chat about anything they want. Okay. Another company is Altspace VR. What they did, they actually they provide these rooms, these digital rooms that people around the world can experience, can play inside, and they actually live streamed the Super Bowl to it. So people from around the world could experience the Super Bowl, their favourite sports teams, and chat with people next to them. And I remember the first time I ever used Altspace. I was in this very room. I was in an avatar very simple to this, and using the Oculus Rift, it's got a positional tracker, so it knows where your head is. I didn't have a microphone at the time, so first of all, I just wanted to explore. There were two other people inside the room. I went right up to them, and looked at them. They turned around, and suddenly I was very aware that I was in this other avatar's personal space. Okay, just think about that for a while. I was in this other avatar's personal space. I had to step back in order to feel comfortable. That's something you can't do with Skype, okay? You can't inhabit someone's physical 3D space through a window, okay? And that's one of the reasons why these things are so powerful. So after I stood back, the other avatar was looking at me. I was looking at him, or her. I had no idea. What I did do, I tilted my head. I couldn't think of anything else to do. I tilted my head to the left. And there was maybe a few seconds, and the other avatar tilted their head to the left. And I was like, right, okay, I'll tilt my head to the right. And the other avatar tilted their head to the right. And we went through this weird ping pong of doing this for about a minute. It was really bizarre, because I know somewhere else in the world, someone else is sat at their computer with this headset on, thinking, what on earth is this guy doing, right? But that's something, a connection I'd never felt before. It's really, really hard to explain what that's like. And it had nothing to do with the fact that the avatar was photorealistic. It wasn't, It was just this box, but you feel connected in a way that I hadn't felt before, and that's why it could be such a powerful thing for journalism. So I guess this all kind of leads up to the fact that TV and games are coming together. It's blurring the lines between them. You can view video content in games. You can play games on your TV. We already know that Microsoft and PlayStation, or rather Microsoft and Sony, have been fighting to take the main area inside the living room, to really own the entertainment space. And I think Sony's in a really, really good position right now, because they've already got this audience that are really hungry for this information, that are technologically educated, that are just want to experience their games up close. So they've got an advantage, I think. This is one potential way we could actually build in journalism and use it in a photorealistic manner. So this is a 3D model. This is a 3D model right now that's getting close to photoreal as possible. So you can see precisely now how this was made. So somebody sits in the center of maybe 100 different SLR cameras, and every camera captures them from that different angle. Once those images have been taken, we use a process called photogrammetry, which is the process of putting together a 3D model based on photos. So similarly to how we're stitching together the 360-degree videos, rather than using the videos, we're actually taking stills, and we're saying, right, this point in this picture is this point in this picture. You're building that together and building up a 3D environment of it at the time. This is a picture of the type of screen, the type of setup that might be used. Additionally, what we can do then, we can generate a model, we can have someone talk, and live, we can put that into this avatar. Okay? So this is incredible. This is a company called, I think it's called FaceShift. They're doing this absolutely live. And that's another way you can bring people into virtual reality. And remember, once people are in a 3D model, you don't have any issues with being able to move around them, okay? Because they're a 3D model. It will just generate the right views for you. You can't do that with 360-degree footage. One other aspect, this was a PhD piece that was really, really interesting. This was taking the raw data that's coming out of your Kinect device. This is a Kinect that was made by Microsoft. As you give it more information, it builds up a more detailed model, and we can then overlay that model directly over the person, okay? So now you're generating a 3D model live of a person that you can put into this 3D space. This is amazing. This is going to be really, really improving. This is going to be increasingly important with virtual reality and getting real content into these 3D spaces, okay? And essentially, it's getting towards this idea. So this was another piece, an experimental piece. I think it will start working soon. So this guy had 3 different Kinect 3D sensors around him. Okay, he's actually viewing this content using his Oculus Rift, and it's really getting towards the holodeck. So he's in a CGI space right now, and obviously you can see it doesn't take a genius to say that this is far away from where we want it to be, visually wise, quality wise. But remember what they said with the Virtual Human Interaction Lab. Above anything else, it was stereoscopic, it was positional tracking and a wide field of view that made for that presence. Just think about when you're watching your episode of The Simpsons or a cartoon. They're not highly detailed cartoon characters, but you still connect with them on a really emotional level. And this technology is only set to improve. There was one game called The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which was maybe one of the first games to use photogrammetry, the technique I told you about before, in a really big way. So rather than going out and photographing, or rather videoing a scene, they went out there and they used the same technique. They took lots of different photos of a scene, they built it together into a 3D environment, and it's really, really realistic. It comes from, it's not generated entirely within a computer. It's using photo textures and using the photos to determine the model. Think about what we could do if we could go to a new scene and we could actually scan that area. Once we scan that area, then you've actually got a genuinely compelling an area that you can be present within and explore around that is actually connected to reality. It is caused by what was actually real, as opposed to when you're generating something entirely within a game environment where you're kind of using photos for references. It's incredibly powerful. So this is a picture of one of the guys taking photos and pulling it in. This is a video of them using it with drones. Okay, so they're taking a unmanned aerial vehicle with cameras on. They're tracking its position. They're using photogrammetry to build up a 3D environment that they can then import into a game environment, and we can have amazing experiences like we saw before. Imagine if you were able to get to a scene and release 10, 50 drones into the air at once. So you're collecting all the data very, very quickly. Obviously, there are going to be huge questions to be answered in terms of ethics, health and safety. But hopefully this will just spark your imagination, and if you're just going to come down me with the rabbit hole a little bit, just think about what this could do. If you could send these autonomously around an environment, get them to scan it, and go directly into a game environment, you could get to the point where you can do this live. Okay, then it really is a 3D space that you can inhabit around as if it were the holodeck from Star Trek. Okay, so I guess this should have really been the title of my talk. 360-degree cameras are flawed, but that doesn't mean to say the experiences that they create and 360-degree video experiences can't be really compelling. It's just at the moment the hardware hasn't kind of caught up with our imaginations, but although they have restrictions, we don't necessarily need them to address every restriction they have. We just need to know what the best use cases are for each of the technology. In fact, I mentioned previously that I've been working with in the medical field. We realised that one amazing thing we could do is record an operation and allow anybody in the world to receive that same level of education. You can allow anybody in the world to be there inside the operating theatre with a world-class surgeon alongside them, seeing an unobstructed point of view from what they're doing. This was the first time this has been done. Obviously, there are issues with this, which we're addressing in terms of confidentiality, but it's really sparking people's imaginations. And I think once we can start to realise the implications and the possibilities with this new type of technologies, then we'll really start to discover the areas where they're not just entertaining, but really, really valuable. And this is something the investor Mark Andreessen said. He said the big thing about VR people are underestimating is the sledgehammer emotional impact of the medium. Images on screens do not compare. When you're taking a topic of journalism, this kind of impact is absolutely crucial to reaching your audience and generating a true emotional connection with them. That's me. I'd love to answer some of your questions. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks very much. Who's up first?
Okay, Mark Jacobs. Ed, great presentation. Thank you so much for that. As you explore the kind of cutting edge of VR, given that your interest initially was in journalism and you kind of refer back to it, I'm just interested about whether or not you see yourself returning to that genre, or whether or not, as you begin to explore what is possible through VR, you find yourself perhaps attracted to other areas, whether it's art or drama or entertainment. Do you see yourself being drawn to other genres through what you've experienced and seen?
Completely, yeah. Virtual reality is changing so much, so rapidly. we were mentioning this on the journey over. You can take the approach where you take a single topic, single genre, and just go steadfast with saying, right, let's figure out how to use virtual reality to maximise this impact. Or, as I mentioned, we need to discover the areas where it's really, really beneficial. And I think there are going to be these nuggets around multiple industries where you understand that virtual reality is really, really valuable. And I'm not saying that entertainment isn't an inherent value. It certainly is. Mark Andreessen, that's precisely what he was on about. But let me give you an example. So I mentioned the army had been using virtual reality for a long time, even when it was effectively bust. Okay. They were using virtual reality to help Twitter. If you want to get up-to-date news, you often follow someone on Twitter and see what they're saying about something. Then you get a company like Vice, which is come along, which has said, you know what? No, we're gonna push out some long-form content. We're gonna produce serious documentaries, an hour long, put them up onto YouTube. And I think that's a way. Virtual reality could be a way that they could access people with the news that wasn't possible before. There's a lot of opportunity out there. I think we've got to keep an eye on it all. Thanks. Is anybody else out here making films with 360-degree cameras? Wanting to make films with 360-degree cameras? Yeah? What kind of technology are you looking at the moment?
We're using GoPro for the camera rig.
Yeah.
So we are still in the GoPro
yeah.
area with the...
I'm not bashing GoPro at all. When used correctly, they can produce really, really great results. Okay, so actually, this action cam, they weren't designed for shooting 360-degree video. It's kind of a bit of a hack, taking cameras which weren't designed for this. But GoPro's obviously seen the benefit in it, and actually, you realise that because you need to stay close to the centre from the no parallax point, actually having a really small camera is really beneficial. And because they can shoot at really good resolution and high frame rate, which is what you really need for virtual reality, you need to shoot high resolution at least 60 frames per second. It's a really viable way to produce some great experiences.
And actually, we believe that it's a good way to kick off the whole virtual reality excitement, even with other technologies combined with cardboards. So we can do virtual reality already.
For sure. For sure. Okay.
Any more questions? Yeah.
So what resolution you shoot in your documentary in China?
The documentary in Hong Kong was shot at 4K by 2K. At the moment, in fact, just under that. At the moment, that's the maximum resolution that the Gear VRs that you saw outside, the one that's powered by this mobile headset, allows. They can't render anything higher than that. Once you move on to a PC or a higher workstation, you can render scenes up to 8K or more. That's only 4K, but remember you're only seeing a very specific section of that content at one time, so you're not seeing a 4K feed. I think somebody from Oculus said that in order to have really retina, so when you're using your up-to-date mobile phones, you can't see the individual pixels. In order to have that type of experience with a VR headset, because you're magnifying the view, they need probably screens of around 16K. Okay, and that's only for a single viewpoint. So if you're trying to extrapolate that for an entire 360-degree video, you need very, very high resolutions. But remember, with the Virtual Human Interaction Lab study, they said actually the quality of the video content is not as important as other aspects.
You've showed a picture of the GoPro 360 3D mount, and have you actually tried it out already? And
I've tried out a hacked version of it, so literally getting elastic bands, sticking a bunch of GoPros together. It doesn't cost £1,000 to do that. Yes, I've done it, and it can be compelling. But the problem with doing it like that, you'll always have stereo pairs that you're going in between. So you'll have, it's not true 3D. You'll have one position where 3D is really great, and then you'll kind of go in between, and it'll be a little bit not so good, and then it'll be good again, okay? And that'll be the same with looking up and down. And I think the only company that's really making great 3D 360 right now is a company called Felix and Paul. Obviously Jaunt, there's a company called Jaunt, which was funded 32 million in their second round of funding after, I think, an 8 million round before that. And they're just throwing a huge amount of money on it. And I think that what they want to do is get to the point where they can use multiple cameras. So I think their current setup is about 32 cameras. I think the idea being that at any one point in the scene, they've got at least 3 cameras looking at that point. So from that, they can generate a bit of a depth map, which really helps with stitching. And they're really concentrating on helping simplify the workflow. Being able to get it from camera to the end user is messy at the moment, and that's where a lot of the money will be made. Is if someone can provide a solution where you can get the footage from the cameras to the user quickly and easily and cheaply, that'd be very successful.
Just on that, what time lapse are we talking about?
Time lapse.
To get these kind of videos to the consumer, because especially for journalism, you have to be fast.
For sure.
Stitching and all that. What does it take?
I went out to Hong Kong in September. I don't think we released the footage till January, and it wasn't entirely because of workflow. We had to wait for the right time, various different reasons. Yada yada yada. You can get to the point now where you can push out content immediately. It's either expensive or it's not at a quality that you'd really be comfortable with. You can get footage that streams out live. Those solutions do exist. They're quite costly at the moment. And obviously that cost will come down. But at the moment when you're doing it all manually and you're capturing 6 lots of more than HD footage at once, you're using up a huge amount of space, and it just takes powerful computers in order to actually stitch it together. If you said you wanted to film a scene and have it ready the next day, that's doable, and it will increase its time. But at the moment, it's kind of comfortable to have more time, a couple of weeks.
I know Samsung not long ago claims that their Project Beyond can live stream.
Probably can do. So Project, who was it? I think it was a guy named Jim Waters. Maybe don't quote me on that. Created a similar kind of hack together of cheap action cameras, and posted this on our Facebook group and said, look, I think this might be a great way to use this. And then obviously, 2 weeks after that, Project Beyond, it was just the exact same thing, but put in a lovely fascia with Samsung written on it. And not to say that there was any correlation there at all, not to suggest that at all. Of course you'll be able to stream footage. I don't believe they've got anything in their setup at the moment that will be able to stitch it intelligently. So you can either stitch for the foreground, or you can stitch for the background, or you can stitch for the average. But unless you're using something like a light field, something to be able to know what depth things are at, you won't be able to stitch that intelligently, and there will be seams. And it's still only video pairs, which again, like I said, have got limitations. Okay.
Anyone else? I've one from from me. Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. You said at some point that the 3D camera technology is flawed. It just can't quite keep up with the human imagination, human creativity and imagination of what we would like to do with it. Mm-hmm. I would actually say I almost got the opposite takeaway from your talk, which is I knew about some of these things, obviously, but not all of them. I'm staggered by some of the innovation and creativity that's going into some of those systems that you described for increasingly detailed and powerful capturing and rendering of reality. To me, it almost seems like the other way around, that there's more creativity going into the underpinning technical systems and solutions than there is to the content that would make you want to use them. So, yeah.
Precisely right. And I want to just emphasize the fact that when I say 3D cameras are flawed, I mean 3D cameras in the sense of what I use for Hong Kong. using multiple cameras from a single point of view with no intelligent stitching, where a lot of people are currently using it, that's fundamentally flawed. But like I said, people are finding creative ways around that. And 360-degree video is not flawed. 360-degree video is incredibly compelling. There's a way to relate with what you're seeing in a whole new way. We're all here because we think there's something in it. It's just the current ways that it's kind of catching up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. But are you seeing as much creativity on the content side as you are on the technology side? That's.
So no, I'm not. No. The whole train arriving into a tunnel, everyone thinks about, right, so we've got this 360-degree content, what can we do to show it off? And everyone thinks, right, we'll go skiing, I skied off, I'm guilty of this, totally myself. I skied off a mountain in a paraglide with a camera in front of me because it was quite awesome, right? But those are the obvious ones. You know, putting it onto a car. And when I say obvious, I'm doing nothing to diminish how great those are as experiences. But once you've seen 5 people jump out of an airplane wearing one on their head, it's going to come back to the content, and it's the content producers like you that are finding these stories and telling them intelligently with an entirely new way of thinking. You said it was part of a new tool set that these creators have got. And we talked previously about Verse, a company founded by Chris Milk, along with 2 others. They're in a really amazing situation right now because they've tied in a lot of really intelligent, creative artists that aren't technical people. They're directors. That they've tied them into being able to produce content for them. And we're trying to get to the stage where talk about content in virtual reality is not about stitching errors. In the same way that talk about shooting a great movie isn't about talking about aperture or shutter speed. Once we can get past that, I can't wait to get to the point where we think, you know what, this isn't interesting anymore. We just need to concentrate on stories. That's where I hope we're going towards.
Yeah. I hate to do this, but the smart ask question occurred to me, and I've got to ask it to someone, so I'm going to ask it to you because you're a smart person. Everyone today has referenced the movie of the Lumiere brothers train coming in. I've got to say, is VR arriving at the station or leaving the station? Oh, sorry, I couldn't help. You don't have to answer that, really.
It's arriving at the station for neither the first nor the last time. Let's say that.
Okay. Thank you, please.